Presidential elections cut across the U.S. every 4 years. Each one is important, but some elections and their consequences seem to weigh heavier than others. Today's books examine the beginning and end of the 45th president's term in office. Emily Larned's socially engaged publishing practice began in 1993 when she made her first zine. Since then, she has produced numerous artist books, zines, and other publications. In addition to her own work, she established Alder and Frankia in 2016, through which she publishes new collaborations, anthologies, and reissues from feminist archives. Larned created November 8, 2016, out of the grief and despair that she and millions of other people felt when Donald Trump won the presidential election over Hillary Clinton. After the election, Larned searched through Associated Press images from Clinton's election night party. She then cropped the original photos to focus on people's faces, drawing us into the reactions of Clinton's supporters. Their highly expressive faces take us through the emotional arc of the evening: worry and disbelief, grief and despair. Looking at these people, I'm transported back to that election night and the days after. That sorrow, anger, and pain flood through my body again. For Larned, seeking her own emotions reflected back in these documentary images was impactful. She explained that the power of collective grief is that it amplifies your own grief, but also helps to realize you are not alone. The collectively held burden eventually gives way to strength, hope, and the motivation to take action. Larned designed, printed, and began circulating November 8, 2016, in the 48 hours after that election. While designing the book, she was particularly interested in images of people whose lives would be most adversely affected by the Trump presidency, such as immigrants, Muslims, Black Americans, LGBTQ people, and women. I have an illustrator friend who visited the Sistine Chapel. She spent a good bit of time in there, but rather than studying Michelangelo's masterpiece, the overwhelming thing in the room, she spent her time observing and sketching the other visitors. I often think back to that and consider where we focus our attention in a room. On election night, it's easy to develop tunnel vision for the candidates. But Larned, like my friend at the Sistine Chapel, recognized the significance of the people in the crowd. November 8, 2016 focuses on those people to remind and motivate us. An election is about a president, but it is also about us, the people who are here, living in this moment, working to create a better future. Now that we've seen reactions to Trump winning in 2016, what about when he lost his bid for re-election in 2020? Flags, Placards, and Illicit Climbers of the Capitol Insurrection by Tyler Starr examines the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. On that day, pro-Trump rioters attempted to prevent lawmakers from certifying the election results that declared President-elect Joe Biden the winner of the 2020 election. Set inside the case is a layered photo collage. The insurrectionists' clambering bodies are removed from the surroundings on the Capitol grounds. Now, these tiny people are scaling walls that are suggested by just a few layers of flat color. I look at these little people and think about what they were climbing for. They were intent on destruction. Tyler Starr's work often examines the violence perpetuated by white supremacists. His deeply researched artist books regularly isolate particular details from FBI records and other archival documents that help us understand the through line of white supremacy from the recent past to the current day. Flags, Placards, and Illicit Climbers of the Capitol Insurrection opens with a brief introduction that includes an excerpt from Trump's inflammatory speech, the estimated number of rioters, the actual number of people who died, and some of the federal crimes these rioters have since been convicted of. This overview provides some basic but critical context for the images to come. The first section of the book is pages and pages of images of the rioters, similar to what we saw earlier in the photo collage. We sometimes see images of the same person, as though we are tracking their movements as they scale the walls. The subtle color blocks give just enough of a sense of the walls and height. The figures are grounded in some environment, but there is little background or other visual noise to distract us from looking closely at their bodies and clothing. Starr spent many hours combing through video footage of the insurrection that can be found on open-source intelligence websites. He explained to me that these sites are important examples of volunteer activism that both establish a public archive and aid the FBI in identifying perpetrators through crowdsourcing. As Starr scoured the footage, he isolated still images that capture the insurrectionists' physical exertions. We can see in these bodies their coordination and determination to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power at the Capitol. Throughout his books, Starr is careful not to glorify white supremacists or their actions. He often presents objects used by perpetrators, instead of images or details about the individual people involved. This book is a slight departure in that Starr shows actual people. However, by removing them from environmental context and presenting them as small figures on the page, these bodies are reduced to something more like a sociological study or maybe even a collection of insects or postage stamps to be analyzed and compared. The second section of the book focuses on another set of details that Starr isolated from open source footage: flags, signs, and placards carried by the insurrectionists. Starr presents groupings of similar items. Sometimes they're easy to identify through a particular emblem or theme, like these variations on the Gadsden flag. Or this spread, which collects flags and symbols of the Second Amendment and gun enthusiasts. Isolated from the environment and regrouped by Starr, the signs give context to the motivations and ideologies of the January 6 rioters. We see many of the viewpoints and grievances that were inflamed by Trump's false claims of election fraud, as well as far-right extremist movements and conspiracy theories. Starr explained to me that when he was watching the live news footage in real time during the insurrection, he was struck by the aesthetic choices people made with their clothes and homemade signs. He also recognized many visual signs and symbols that identified participants with white nationalist-aligned militias. Starr designed the book to present this complex visual information in accessible chunks that viewers can discover and investigate for themselves. Isolating the figures and flags on this plain background neutralizes them. Starr's careful groupings steer us to the details that we have to stay vigilant against, the ones that communicate the threat of violence by white supremacy to our people and our democracy. November 8, 2016, is a deeply personal response to a historic moment. Flags, Placards, and Illicit Climbers of the Capitol Insurrection is more removed and analytic, but still casts a deeply concerned and critical eye. Both books isolate and represent the body language of Trump's supporters and opponents, examining the tremendous feelings, impacts, and themes of this tumultuous presidency.